He typed one word, understood, set the phone face down on the bar and stared at the chandelier. 15 minutes passed. Then her phone buzzed again. Wait, are we breaking up? And that was the tell, the seam in everything. She hadn't wanted a break. She'd wanted the threat of one. She'd wanted the panic, the begging, the version of Tommy who rearranged his entire life to keep the peace. She had been throwing that grenade for 23 years, and he had been falling on it every single time. Not this time. He picked it up, looked at it, and set it gently on the table between them. You said it's just a break. I'm respecting your wishes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. Tommy finished his bourbon. First time in 3 months he'd actually drained the glass. Because somewhere between the nightstand moved to the wall, the phone hidden every time he walked in the room, the forum with 300 strangers teaching his wife to treat their marriage like hostile territory, and the overheard phone call about leverage and timelines and phases. Somewhere in all of that, the man who had spent 23 years agreeing with everyone because he thought it was kindness had finally, quietly, completely understood that it was fear. And the fear was gone.
Picture a Tuesday night in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 11 o'clock, a hotel lobby bar humming with the low, indifferent energy of a place designed to hold people who have nowhere else they'd rather be. Tommy Ogilvy, 51 years old, is sitting on a bar stool he has quietly claimed as his own over the past several weeks, nursing a glass of bourbon that has long since stopped being bourbon and is now just a glass of cold water and memories of ice. The kind of drink a man holds not because he wants it, but because having something in his hand gives his body permission to stay in one place while his mind goes somewhere it isn't ready to name. The bartender, a young man named Darius, stopped offering refills an hour ago. Not out of indifference, but out of the particular wordless sensitivity that bartenders develop for the kind of stillness that isn't peace. 3 hours on the same stool, the same glass. The lobby chandelier above casting its soft, indifferent light over a man who has been bending for months and hasn't yet decided whether he's going to snap or simply go straight. Then his phone buzzes on the bar, a text from his wife, Rosetta. I think we need a break. It's just a break. Stop being weird about it. Tommy reads it once, sets the phone down, picks it back up, reads it again, and then, in a moment that will redefine every single thing that comes after it, he types one word, understood, sets the phone face down on the polished bar, and returns his gaze to the chandelier. 15 minutes pass. Darius wipes the same glass 3 times on the same stretch of counter. The lobby hums, the chandelier holds. Then the phone buzzes again, and this time the message is only 5 words. Wait, are we breaking up? And in those 5 words, the entire architecture of what has been happening to Tommy Ogilvy for the better part of a year is suddenly, completely, and irreversibly laid bare. She never expected him to agree. The entire maneuver, the text, the casualness of it's just a break, the preemptive stop being weird about it, was engineered not as a genuine request, but as a detonation, designed to produce a specific and well-rehearsed reaction, panic, pleading, the version of Tommy who had spent 23 years folding himself into whatever shape the room required. She had thrown a grenade and waited for him to fall on it, and instead he had picked it up, looked at it with level, exhausted eyes, and set it quietly on the table between them. For 40 more minutes, Tommy sat at that bar before he answered her, and by the time he finally typed his response, the answer that came out was not the answer he would have given 40 minutes earlier. His name is Tommy Ogilvy. He has been married to Rosetta for 23 years. He has been the agreeable one, the steady one, the man his wife called her Steady Eddie in a tone he always received as a compliment and is only now beginning to understand was something else entirely. And in a lobby bar in Tulsa on a Tuesday night, with the ice long melted and the chandelier burning soft and steady overhead, he finally stopped pretending.
To understand what happened in that hotel bar, you have to understand what came before it. The version of Tommy and Rosetta that existed before Margot Jennings and their forum quietly dismantled it from the inside out.
They had met 25 years ago at a friend's cookout off Riverside Drive, and the first thing Tommy noticed about Rosetta was that she was laughing at something nobody else in the yard thought was funny, completely unbothered by the absence of an audience, entirely self-contained in her own amusement. He loved that about her immediately, the way she didn't need the room's permission to feel what she felt. They were married 19 months later. Their daughter Ma arrived a year after that, and for a long stretch of years, the life they built together was genuinely, quietly good. Not the manufactured perfection of a movie marriage, but the real, lived-in warmth of two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing. Saturday mornings at Brookside Market, Rosetta's hand resting on the back of his neck while he drove, the stupid little drawings of cats with Tommy's face that she left folded inside his lunch bag, not love notes, just small, absurd offerings of affection, every single one of which he kept in a manila envelope in his desk drawer at work, because he was, at his core, a man who understood that the small things were the whole thing. He managed logistics for a regional distribution center south of downtown, nothing glamorous but steady, with good insurance. Rosetta taught second grade at a magnet school near Philbrook. They weren't rich, they were comfortable, and Tommy, for 23 years, had quietly, completely believed that comfortable was another word for safe. The first disruption was small enough to dismiss, which is exactly why it worked. Sometime around March, Rosetta's phone changed its behavior, migrated from its usual place on the kitchen counter, face up and volume on, into her pocket, into the bathroom, onto the nightstand, face down on silent. Tommy noticed it the way you notice a draft before you locate the open window, a vague wrongness without a clear source. One evening, he leaned in to kiss her forehead while she scrolled in bed and watched her tilt the screen away from him. Not fast, not panicked, casually, the way you'd adjust a pillow. He asked who it was. She told him it was nobody, a group chat. He asked what the group chat was about. She gave him the look, the patient, slightly annoyed look she had perfected over years of living with a man she believed would always let things go, and said he wouldn't get it. And he let it go, because that was who Tommy Ogilvy was, the easygoing one, the agreeable one, the man who had been through 23 years of marriage and could count on one hand the number of genuine arguments they'd had. The group chat was called Reclaim Your Space. He saw the name once when her phone lit up on the kitchen table. 347 members, moderated by someone named Margot Jennings. He didn't think much about it in that moment. He would think about nothing else for the rest of the year. The nightstand was moved to the far wall 3 weeks later, its cords stretched across the floor like a small domestic casualty, and Tommy, true to form, didn't move it back. May 9th arrived without ceremony or warning, the way the worst days usually do. A Tuesday afternoon. The distribution center consolidating operations, 37 positions eliminated, including his, and Tommy driving home at 2 o'clock with a cardboard box on the passenger seat containing a coffee mug and 11 years of Rosetta's cat drawings in a manila envelope. He had been with that company for over a decade. He'd given it the reliable, unglamorous, steady best of himself, and it had handed him a severance package and a Tuesday afternoon with nowhere to be. He walked into the house to find Rosetta grading papers at the dining table, and when he told her what had happened, he waited for what any man who had spent 23 years building a life with a woman had a reasonable right to expect: concern, or fear, or at minimum the specific warmth of someone who understands that the person in front of them is absorbing a blow. What he got instead was calculation. A brief, assessing pause, followed by a series of rapid, practical questions that had the unmistakable quality of a woman running numbers rather than comforting a husband. How long was severance? 12 weeks. That's not enough. He knew. So what was his plan? He had been unemployed for 45 minutes. He didn't have a plan. He had a cardboard box and the particular hollow feeling of a man who has just had the floor quietly removed from beneath him. That night, Rosetta was on the phone in the bathroom for over an hour, and through the closed door, Tommy caught fragments. Not pulling his weight. I deserve stability. And the phrase that would become the new organizing principle of their household. Margot says financial stress reveals character. She was discussing her husband like he was a case study in someone else's curriculum, a data point to be analyzed rather than a person to be stood beside.
By June, the attacks had developed a rhythm so regular Tommy could have set a calendar by them. Monday, did you apply anywhere today? Wednesday, my salary can't carry both of us. Friday, my father never went one day without working. Not one day, Tommy. He applied for 14 jobs in 2 weeks, 3 callbacks, 1 interview that led nowhere. The market for 51-year-old logistics managers in Tulsa was not exactly experiencing a renaissance, and the daily accounting of his inadequacy did not accelerate the process. His friend Preston Vanderpool noticed it at their biweekly coffee at the diner on Peoria Avenue, told Tommy plainly that what Rosetta was doing wasn't handling the situation, it was punishing him for it, as though the layoff were a character failing he had chosen rather than a structural reality that had happened to him. Tommy wanted to argue. He couldn't. Then came the tears, Rosetta's single most efficient tactical weapon, deployed not from genuine hurt, but with the strategic precision of a lawyer introducing evidence at exactly the moment the jury is wavering. Every time Tommy raised something real, the phone, the nightstand, the way she flinched when he reached for her hand during a movie, the tears arrived on schedule, and within 20 minutes he would be apologizing not just for what he'd raised, but for the act of raising it, for his existence in a form that caused her discomfort. It happened 4 times before Tommy stopped apologizing. The 5th time, he simply stopped talking. Rosetta waited for the machinery to engage. It didn't. She looked at him the way a mechanic looks at an engine that won't turn over, not heartbroken, merely puzzled, and walked out of the room.
After the 5th conversation ended in silence rather than apology, Tommy Ogilvy stopped initiating. Anything, everything, completely and without announcement. No good morning text on Monday, no asking what she needed from the grocery store on Wednesday, no filling the dinner table silence with the steady, reliable, conversational presence he had been providing for over 2 decades without ever once being thanked for it. He simply withdrew the supply without explanation, and what followed in the days after was a masterclass in the specific discomfort of a person who has been taking something for granted, suddenly discovering the exact dimensions of what they had. Monday, she glanced at her phone twice before 10 o'clock, waiting for a message that didn't come. Tuesday, she mentioned a meeting with her principal, and Tommy said, "Cool," and returned to his cover letter. Wednesday, he drove to the grocery store alone without asking what she needed, and when he came home, she was standing at the kitchen counter looking at the bags. "You didn't get oat milk? We always get oat milk." And Tommy said simply, "Then add it to your list." She stared at him for a long moment, as though trying to identify a sound she couldn't place. He put the groceries away. Thursday, she suggested watching a movie after dinner, and Tommy said he was going for a walk. "Since when do you go for walks?" "Since today." By Friday, she was texting during dinner again in the old familiar way, but her eyes kept drifting up over the phone to the space across the table, not at Tommy exactly, but at the absence where the conversation used to be, the quiet that had replaced the background hum of his attentiveness and that she didn't like but couldn't name without admitting she missed what she herself had pushed away. Then one evening in late June, Rosetta came downstairs without her phone and sat in the armchair across from him while he read. She said she felt like they were roommates. Tommy looked up from his book and laid it out with a calm, unhurried precision that surprised even him. She had moved his nightstand to the wall. She had set physical boundaries on being touched. She had told him her body instinctively pulled away from him. What exactly did she think roommates felt like? Her chin began to drop, the first choreographed movement of the familiar sequence, and Tommy held up his hand and told her not to cry. Just answer. She said she'd wanted space, not this. He asked what this was. You being gone while you're still here. He told her he was respecting her boundaries. She said that wasn't what it was. He asked what it was then. She opened her mouth, closed it, stood up, and went back upstairs. And from the couch, Tommy heard the bathroom door, the phone call beginning, Margot's forum convening its emergency session. He could picture it with perfect clarity. Rosetta typing that he was emotionally withdrawing, asking how to get him to re-engage without surrendering her boundaries, and 300 women who had never met him typing back in confident unison to hold the line because he was testing her. Nobody in that forum paused to consider the far simpler and more devastating possibility that Tommy Ogilvy had not stopped engaging as a power move or a test. He had stopped because in a YMCA locker room on a Wednesday afternoon, sitting on a bench with his shoes untied and his hands on his knees and his eyes on the gray tile floor, he had arrived at the quiet, flat, factual realization that the woman he had built his life with simply didn't like him anymore.
The YMCA on South Lewis became Tommy's place that summer. 3 or 4 evenings a week, 40 minutes on the treadmill at a pace that wasn't quite running and wasn't quite walking, but was at minimum the sensation of moving forward, which was more than he could say for anything happening inside the house on the other side of town. The locker room bench on that particular Wednesday afternoon had held him for 20 minutes. Shoes untied, hands on knees, staring at gray tile while his legs, which worked perfectly fine, simply refused to receive the instruction to stand, because the body sometimes understands things before the mind is ready to say them out loud. The realization that settled over him in that room was not dramatic, carried no thunder or revelation. It was quiet and flat and entirely factual, the way you might finally acknowledge that a piece of furniture no longer matches the room it's in. The woman he had built his entire adult life with didn't like him. Not in a complicated, layered, workable way, in a simple, concluded furniture replacement way. He tied his shoes, stood up, drove downtown to the Hyatt Regency, and sat at the lobby bar until they closed. That became his new routine. 1 drink, 3 hours, Darius keeping the ice water full and the questions mercifully absent. Rosetta never asked where he went in the evenings. He was fairly certain she was relieved by the empty house. Then came August, and the job offer. Operations coordinator at a food distribution company in Broken Arrow. Less money, longer commute, but a real paycheck, and the specific dignity of having somewhere to be in the morning. Tommy came home to tell Rosetta and found her at the dining table typing in the forum and watched with the detached attention of a scientist observing a documented phenomenon as her smile, when he delivered the news, arrived precisely 1 second late and reached her eyes half a second after that. "That's great, Tommy. I'm proud of you." He told her she didn't sound proud. The sequence engaged immediately. Tears, the accusation that he would say such a thing after she'd just expressed pride, the pivot that transformed him instantaneously from the person delivering news into the aggressor who had manufactured a grievance. He had seen this exact sequence 17 times. But this time, standing outside it for the first time, watching it run like a program executing its own code, he simply said, "You're right. Thank you." And the tears froze midstream, because the tears required the argument the way a fire requires oxygen, and he had just quietly closed the vent. A week into the new job, Rosetta began being nice. Not warm, not the organic warmth of the cookout and the yellow sundress, but the calibrated niceness of someone conducting an evaluation. Coffee in the morning before he left, questions about his day when he returned, a hand on his shoulder once in the hallway. He wanted to believe it with an intensity that surprised him, but the wanting to believe it and the believing it were 2 different things now, and he no longer had the energy to collapse the distance between them. Then came the Wednesday he arrived home early, orientation schedule running short, and heard her voice through the open bedroom door before she knew he was in the house. "No, Margot, I'm doing exactly what you said. Reconnect just enough to stabilize. If he files while he's emotional, I lose leverage. He got a job, so the financial argument is off the table. I need a different approach." Tommy stood in the hallway. The walls didn't move. The floor did. Tommy stood in that hallway for as long as it took for his heart rate to drop to something that wouldn't show on his face, then walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and stared at its contents with the focused blankness of a man choosing not to react before he decided what the reaction should be. When Rosetta came downstairs 20 minutes later and smiled at him and offered to make pasta, he said sure, and they ate pasta, and she told him about a student who'd drawn a picture of his dog, and he nodded in all the right places, and she believed the reconnection was working precisely because she had no way of knowing he had heard every word. That Sunday, he called Ma, their daughter, 22 years old and living in Austin and working at a tech startup, who had moved out at 18 and rarely visited, and who said, "Dad, you sound weird," with the unceremonious accuracy of someone who had grown up watching something from a particular angle and understood its shape better than either of the people inside it. He told her he was fine. She said he wasn't. He asked what made her think something was happening with her mom. A silence, and then, "Because something's always happening with Mom. I just stopped asking." That sentence landed harder than anything Rosetta had said in 4 months, because it carried the specific weight of a child who had quietly understood the architecture of her own family for years and made her peace with it in the private, uncelebrated way the children of difficult marriages learn to do. Mid-August, Tuesday night, Tommy came home from the lobby bar at midnight to find Rosetta awake in bed, phone in hand, with the announcement that they needed to talk, and for the first time, instead of easing into the conversation with the careful, conflict-averse softness of the agreeable one, he simply said it all. The nightstand moved to the wall, the phone hidden every time he walked into a room. 3 months without her reaching for him. Margot Jennings and her forum teaching her to treat their marriage like hostile territory requiring a tactical response. Rosetta's face cycled through its familiar transformations and arrived at the tears, both hands over her face, shoulders shaking. "I knew you'd make me the villain. Margot warned me about this exact moment. You're trying to isolate me from my support system." Tommy told her plainly that her support system was 300 strangers on the internet who had been taught to view her husband as the enemy. She said he didn't understand what she was going through. He said to tell him. She said she shouldn't have to explain her needs. He asked how he would know them otherwise. She went silent, the weaponized silence, the kind built not from having nothing to say, but from having calculated that saying nothing was the more effective instrument. Rolled over, pulled the covers up, and did not speak to him again until Thursday evening, when she sent the text that changed everything. "I think we need a break. It's just a break. Stop being weird about it." Tommy was at the lobby bar. Darius had just sent down the bourbon. He read the message and felt something inside him that had been slowly, steadily bending for months, under the weight of the nightstand and the forum and the weaponized tears and the overheard phone call and Ma's quiet, resigned voice saying, "I just stopped asking." Go not to breaking point, but to its opposite, perfectly, finally, irreversibly straight. He typed, "Understood." Set the phone face down, and for the first time in 23 years, meant it completely. The word "understood" sat in Rosetta's phone like a stone dropped into still water, and for 15 minutes the ripples went entirely in one direction, outward, toward her, while Tommy stared at the lobby chandelier, and Darius wiped the same stretch of mahogany bar with the focused restraint of a man who understood that some silences were not his to fill. Then the phone buzzed again. "Wait, are we breaking up?" And there it was. The tell, the seam in the architecture of the entire maneuver, the 5 words that revealed the strategy in full. She had not wanted a break. She had wanted the threat of a break. The grenade rolled across the floor toward the version of Tommy she had built and relied upon for 2 decades. The one who panicked, who begged, who rearranged his entire life at the first sign of her withdrawal, and thereby confirmed each time that she held the controls. She had thrown the grenade expecting him to fall on it. Instead, he had picked it up, looked at it with level and exhausted eyes, and placed it gently on the table between them. "You said it's just a break. I'm respecting your wishes." 3 dots appeared on the screen, disappeared, appeared again, and then nothing. Tommy finished his bourbon. The first time in 3 months he had actually drained the glass. And the next morning, Friday, he called Grady Neville, the family law attorney Preston had mentioned. Straightforward, no theater, office on 15th Street near the courthouse. He sat in the waiting room for 40 minutes, which was fine, because Tommy Ogilvy had gotten exceptionally good at sitting. Grady asked what he wanted. Tommy said he wanted to know his options. And then he told Grady everything. The nightstand, the phone, the forum, the tears deployed like clockwork, the job loss turned into a character indictment, the overheard phone call about leverage and timelines and phases. Grady took notes on a yellow legal pad without expression and told him he didn't have to decide that day, but if he decided to file, they should document the pattern. Tommy told him he'd already been documenting it, not intentionally. He simply hadn't deleted any of her texts. Months of messages telling him he wasn't enough, or was too much, or was the problem, or needed to change, or needed to give her more space, or needed to try harder. All of it time-stamped and sitting in his phone like an accidental archive of someone else's campaign. Then came Saturday afternoon, and Rosetta descended the stairs in the dress she had worn to their 15th anniversary dinner. Hair done, perfume he hadn't smelled in a year, having made reservations at Juniper and wanting to talk. And she was beautiful. She had always been beautiful. That had never been the question. Tommy told her gently but without flinching. She had texted him they needed a break 36 hours ago. She had told him to stop being weird about it. She had spent 4 months on a forum learning to push him away, and when he had finally, quietly stopped pushing back, she had panicked. He watched the chin drop first, then the brow, then the eyes. The choreography he now knew by heart, and told her not to cry, to talk to him like he was a person rather than an audience. She flinched. Nobody had ever named the mechanism to her face before. He asked for one specific apology, one concrete thing she had done. Not, "I'm sorry you feel that way," but a real sentence with a real subject. 30 seconds passed. A full minute. She tried, "I'm sorry that you felt," and she couldn't complete it. Her entire operating system, built over years of tactical emotional performance, simply did not contain the code for genuine, unscripted accountability. Tommy had his answer.
The week after the Saturday dinner moved with the compressed, irreversible momentum of something that has been building for so long that when it finally releases, it doesn't feel like an explosion, but like a door clicking shut. Quiet, definitive, and entirely final. Monday, Grady filed. Tuesday, Rosetta found out, and her face ran through its full color wheel. White, then red, then the tears, real ones this time, mixed together with the tactical ones in proportions even she could no longer separate, which was perhaps the most honest thing that had happened between them in months. Wednesday was a 3-hour session with the forum, fragments of which drifted through the wall of their shared house with a specific, exhausting familiarity of a language Tommy had never chosen to learn. He's retaliating. Classic manipulation. Document everything. Thursday, Rosetta's sister called from Bartlesville to tell Tommy he was making a mistake, that Rosetta loved him. Tommy said quietly that Rosetta loved what he provided, and that he had stopped providing, and suggested she watch what changed. Friday night, Rosetta tried one final time. No phone, no makeup, sitting on the couch looking smaller than Tommy had seen her look in years, her voice cracked in a way he genuinely could not immediately categorize as performance or truth. Telling him she had spoken that day to a real therapist, a woman named LaShelby, not Margot, and she said the therapist had told her she used emotional reactions as a form of control and that she didn't know how to be wrong. Tommy sat across from her and felt the specific, dangerous pull of the woman from the cookout, the yellow sundress, the laugh that needed no one's permission, felt it the way you feel a current beneath still water, real and powerful and capable of taking you somewhere you wouldn't choose to go. He asked if she believed what the therapist had said. She said maybe. Then her phone buzzed on the cushion beside her. 2 seconds, just instinct, just the reflex of a habit 23 years old. Her thumb swiped, and Tommy saw the screen before she caught herself and looked back up at him with wet, searching eyes. A notification from Reclaim Your Space, Margot Jennings. The preview reading, update us on how Phase 4 is going. Phase 4? He stood up, told her good luck with the therapist and meant it, and when she said, "Tommy, wait," he said the same words she had texted him from the lobby bar. "You asked for a break. I understood. I still do." 3 months later, the divorce was final. Tommy moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near Gathering Place, started the new job in Broken Arrow, kept going to the gym, and stood up from the bench every single time. Ma flew up from Austin for a weekend, her first visit in 2 years, and they walked the river trail together in the low summer heat, not saying much. She told him Margot's forum had been shut down. It turned out Margot Jennings had been navigating her own 3rd divorce while coaching hundreds of women through theirs. Tommy didn't laugh because it wasn't funny. Ma asked if he was okay, and he thought about it with the seriousness the question deserved before answering honestly. He had spent 23 years agreeing with everyone and had believed it was kindness, when really it had been fear. Fear of finding out what would happen if he finally said what he actually meant. She asked what happened when he did.
He told her Rosetta had asked if they were breaking up, and he had realized in that moment she had never once, in 23 years, genuinely considered the possibility that he would say yes. They walked another quarter-mile in the easy quiet of two people who no longer needed to fill space to prove they were okay. The river ran low beside the trail. A couple near the bank tossed a frisbee, and their dog sprinted into the water after it, joyful and completely uncomplicated. "Dad, yeah, I'm glad you said yes." She told him to stop being weird, and he understood, finally, fully, for the first time, that being weird was simply what it had looked like when he stopped pretending.